Now, of course, it is important to note that South African doctors and experts on Monday suggested that Omicron may be causing less severe clinical symptoms than other coronavirus variants. However, they also cautioned that more research is needed before definitive conclusions can be drawn. Well, let's head to South Africa now. The country's economy contracted by 1.5% in the third quarter of 2021. This is as the country grappled with riots and, of course, a tighter COVID-19 restrictions. Now, a spree of arson and looting rocked parts of South Africa in July. That's following the jailing of ex-President Jacob Zuma for contempt. The country worst hit by COVID-19 in Africa also tightened restrictions in July to tackle a third wave of infections. Trade, catering and accommodation industries fell by 5.5%. Manufacturing shrank by 4.2%, while agricultural activity plunged by 13.6%, marking its biggest drop in 5 years. Well, let's now take apart those numbers further with Angelo Coppola. He joins us in Johannesburg. Angelo, great to have you with us today. Now, of course, analysts are saying that despite 4 successive quarters of growth for the country, they mostly expected this decline that we're seeing today. Give us some insight into the key factors behind this contraction.
Well, Uche, you've mentioned most of them, but it's the quantum of the contraction that's got all the analysts and economists concerned. 1.5% is a sizable drop. As you mentioned, the big drop there contributed to the drop were caused by the rioting, the destruction in 2 of the country's 3 economic hubs, that's Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Cape Town and the Western Cape generally missed all that criminal activity. The lockdown did also have an impact there. The top 2 contributors in the contraction, as you mentioned, were trade and manufacturing, and they contribute minus 0.7 and minus 0.5 percentage points there. The issue here was with the agricultural sector, which showed that 13.6% drop. That added minus 0.4% to that 1.5% drop in GDP growth. But that's seen as temporary because of the overall agricultural sector confidence levels, which were measured just recently. And they're at the second highest record they've been since 2001. And economists now are saying that to some extent that downplays the recent challenges in terms of high input costs that we're seeing in that sector. The problem here is, Uche, that we're starting to hear economists suggesting that the economy might contract even more in quarter 4. And we're going to have to wait to see what those numbers show, Uche.
Right. Well, an economic recovery, Angelo, after the July unrest and, of course, those COVID-19 lockdowns, that has been understandably rocky so far. But given that the state has been struggling to implement fundamental economic reforms, of course, after years of sluggish growth in the country, what then is the outlook for growth going forward? What are the political and economic factors that will determine this growth?
Well, Rocky doesn't even begin to cover the issues that are facing the country's government and economists and people and businesses here. One of the key indicators is real job creation, and we know that unemployment data is at record low levels again from the latest data that was released about 10 days ago. It's been fairly consistent. Inflation is under control, which is good news. The interest rates are starting to trend upwards, which may attract some institutional hot money, but that's not good for sustainable economic growth. Foreign direct investment is showing some signs of resurgence, but that's mostly due to Ramaphosa's investment roadshows. And in fact, the Reserve Bank says that FDI increased by around 17.4 billion in quarter 2 of this year. But we've said this all before, the country isn't short of plans or task teams or investment envoys. We're short on economic growth, and it's unclear where that spark is going to come from. The country's traditional trading partners may help, but the possibilities and opportunities in the African continental free trade area are perhaps the biggest opportunity that the country has to take advantage of. Time's going to tell how business and the state react to that continental market. Uche.
Quite right, Angelo, time will tell. But let's shift focus slightly now, because we know today Parliament was to decide on whether to pass a law that will allow for the expropriation of land without compensation. We've been talking about this for a while. Is there any new information on that?
Well, late this afternoon, that amendment had been booted into touch, to use a rugby analogy. The biggest surprise was in Parliament that 51 votes were not cast. And analysts are suggesting that if those votes had been cast, the ANC might well have got their required majority to carry that amendment through. Interestingly, though, the EFF voted against the amendment in its entirety, and that's despite an alliance that was hyped up when the process was started some 4 years ago. MPs voted along both party political lines generally, except for those 51 votes I've just mentioned, and we don't know who they are because it was a secret ballot. The ANC hasn't commented on their loss just yet, but the opposition parties are very vocal. The EFF saying that they were never going to support a party, as they put it, that it was controlled by white minority capital. The DA says the ANC failure is a victory for South Africa's constitutional order. So it's likely back to the drawing board. And as I said, the process lasted some 4 years and cost millions of dollars. And it's likely to see it come back to Parliament in the near future in a slightly different guise.
Well, I'm sure you'll be watching that for us, Angelo. Many thanks for those insights. That, of course, is Angelo Coppola joining us there in Johannesburg.